I think that was the number, and he needed 15. It took him 3 months to get 15 million ounces. That whole time, the COMEX registered ounces was way over 15. It was 40, 50 million ounces. So for Eric Sprott to go in and say, all right, these are registered ounces, they're ready to be delivered, and then not be able to get anything for 3 months, and some of those bars were made after he stood for delivery, it gives you an idea that this whole thing about COMEX registered ounces and COMEX, any reporting coming out of the warehouses that are controlled by the CME who owns the COMEX or by the banks that control the daily price of silver, you cannot believe any of it because most likely they're lies.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Steve. Our next question is from forum member Aviator. Bix, how do you see the ending of QE2 at the end of this month unfolding? Are we likely to see a crisis like 2008 October that forces QE3, or will things limp along until fall or longer?
I don't see QE2, QE3, QE4 as being any kind of stake in the ground that's going to cause any kind of crash. I think Ron Paul seems to think they're going to go for QE3. Ron Paul's in the know with the good guys. If they do put a stake in the ground and say, no more, we're stopping the debt ceiling, no more QEs, things like that. What they want right now is for the banks to crash because of the deceit that they have been living under for so long. So a more likely scenario for the coming spark of the crash, we can kind of see it now, it's starting. But a big spark, I think, is going to be some revelations in the mortgage fraud area, which was gigantic, as in, some of these mortgage-backed securities didn't even have houses attached to the mortgage. It was pure fraud, and a lot of it was sold off to China. China's not happy about it. So I think it's more likely that the good guys want the tipping point to come and point arrows directly at the banksters so that they are at fault when this crash happens.
Thanks, Bix. Do you think the banksters are in a rock and a hard place at this moment? Is this the time where based on your road to Rooter theory, where the good guys can move and change what the plans of the bankers are?
Yes. Now is the time. You can see it from what Jamie Dimon is saying. He's coming out saying some pretty nasty stuff about what he's going to do to the economy if the U.S. doesn't raise the debt ceiling, or if no QE2 or QE3 is put in place. He is kind of the lead guy on the bankster side, and he put his guy Bill Daley as Obama's right-hand man. He's sitting right next to Obama every day now, telling him what to do. So this is the point where the good guys have a chance to stick a stake through the heart of these vampire bankers.
Should be an interesting 6 months.
Exactly. And that all comes in line with what Cliff High is saying as well.
For sure, and many others, definitely. Bix, many economists look at the financials, whether they be fundamentals or charting, and ignore external effects and possible black swan events. When doing your forecasts for gold and silver and stocks, etc., do you take into account things such as climate change, increasing earthquakes and volcanoes, and peak oil or peak name your resource, having reached unsustainable levels to support 7 billion people? In fact, environmental issues may have already reached a tipping point and changed the playing field forever, and ordinary forecasting models, financial forecasting models, are no longer applicable. Can you tell me if you look at these things and perhaps try to account for them in your forecasts?
I really don't, and here's why. I don't really try to forecast gold and silver. I know I've thrown some huge prices out there for silver. And the reason I don't try to say, this is my model or this is my forecast is because I know that gold and silver are rigged. Every single day, every single trade the computer programmers who rig the markets decide where to put the price of gold and silver. You could have a nuclear bomb go off on top of the COMEX, and if the computer isn't there, it would make it so that the price of gold did not move an inch. So to say that there's outside influences that can sway a model for your future price of gold or silver, it's just not true. I believe that, in my early days of studying gold and silver back in 2001, 2002, yes, that was my focus. A lot of it was the future is so dim, they're printing so much money, there's all these possibilities of a black swan event, an earthquake. All this will affect the price of gold and affect the price of silver. But over time, usually the exact opposite would happen in the gold and silver markets, because it is those times of stress that the banking cabal needs to keep the lid on gold and silver prices. That's why they made this latest slam of silver down from $50 to $35. You can't have people in times of stress running to gold and silver if you're going to continue to function an unbacked monetary system.
Thanks, Bix. Okay, the next section we're going to be discussing is the metals and silver section. And next question is from Perseus.
Hi, Bix. Bix, over the last few years, I've developed a kind of internet addiction to staring at Kitco charts, and basically, what's obvious to me is the silver market's heavily manipulated. What's so important about the silver market that makes it so important and so pervasive and blatant, the manipulation in this particular market?
It's an excellent question, and the answer is gigantic. The answer is that silver and gold are the only alternative to an unbacked fiat money system. It's an organic alternative, because silver and gold have the history of being money for so long. Prior to 71 and prior to the 60s, gold and silver throughout history was the most used form of money for various reasons. One, it's rare, it's divisible, it's precious, it has stood the test of time, especially when an unbacked fiat money system fails, which there have been 3,000 currencies that have failed. Every single time it goes back to gold and silver. So the United States and the banks around the world know this, and this is what the banksters fear. And Alan Greenspan knew it back in, he wrote the paper in the 60s, Gold and Economic Freedom. He was hired by Gerald Ford to run the Council of Economic Advisors, which implemented the rigging of the markets of gold and silver to prolong this fiat money system. This is the whole idea behind the road to Ruta. If you have an unbacked currency, you have to control the price of all natural resources. Otherwise, people would just rush into gold, rush into silver. Everybody would doubt the value of this paper money. So that's kind of the whole concept behind, you have to keep, especially gold, silver, and oil, because oil factors into this as well. But gold, silver, and oil are the most important resources that you must contain if you're going to have an unbacked currency system.
Okay, Bix, with that in mind then, how long do you estimate it to be before the banks actually experience a failure to manipulate the price of precious metals via the futures market to maintain this dollar hegemony?
I wish I knew. Over the years, I had thought that it was going to happen with the first crash. Well, not even the first crash. The first time that the road to Ruta theory, the first time they tried to take the banks out was in 1987, 2 weeks after Greenspan was put as the head of the Federal Reserve Bank. You had that Black Monday stock market crash. That was the first time they take them out. They tried to take them out, and it wasn't big enough. Then there were small crashes, but nothing that was orchestrated by the good guys to get rid of these banksters. Until you had after 9/11 changed everything. That was a seminal point in the implementation of the gold standard, this whole thing, the reason they allowed manipulation. After 9/11, they said, no more of this. We're going to take these banksters out. That's when they basically got rid of all the rules behind regulations behind derivatives and things like that. Gave the bankers enough rope to hang themselves, and then they tried to take them out in 2008. Now, it was close, and what happened in the end is the people of the United States weren't ready for it yet. They allowed Hank Paulson to go in there with a gun and hold up Congress, and Congress gave him all this money, and they allowed it to go on for a couple more years. We're at that point now. This is the third attempt. This will probably start sometime this summer. It'll be the third attempt, and it's all going to come crashing down at once. Gold and silver manipulation cannot end before everything crashes, because it'll cause the crash. So it might happen the same time, it might happen a few days before, but once gold and silver are allowed to trade freely, you can kiss everything else goodbye that's related to an unbacked fiat currency or a derivative.
It's fascinating. Just the first time I came across your work was when I read an article you wrote on the silver that was used in the Manhattan Project, the Calutron. And some estimates I've read suggest that it was 14,700 tons used in that project. Could you discuss your theory behind that silver was used to flood the market, or?
Well, it's an amazing story, and this is the story of the Manhattan Project, where they built this city to create the first atom bomb. What they needed these gigantic magnets to separate the uranium, and they said they needed copper for these magnets, but what they actually needed silver. They said, well, since copper was in short supply in World War II, we had to, go to the Treasury to borrow, it's about 500 million ounces of silver. Well, the reality is silver is a better conductor of electricity, and it makes for a better magnet than copper. So the whole story behind the copper thing didn't make any sense at all. But this silver, it was 500 million ounces, was taken out of Treasury, melted down, and used as in their Calutron, which is the name of the magnets, to purify the uranium and to make the first atom bomb. Well, supposedly after about 3 or 4 years after World War II, they said, the official story was that so there would be no reason for the United States of America to shut down the most important facility that has ever been invented in the history of the world, just to take silver that was sitting in a vault, that was taken out to make these magnets, and then to put it back into the vault and say that, we've replaced all the monetary silver. They wouldn't risk it. And they didn't risk it. And it wasn't until the early 1990s that the Calutrons were actually shut down. And this was announced, after 20 or 30 years, it no longer was a secret. But this was announced in early 1990s that they have shut down the Calutrons, and they actually showed pictures of the casings. And basically what they did is, I believe they needed that silver to the physical